If Anne Boleyn had escaped execution in 1536, the course of English and even European history could have been significantly altered. While this is speculative, a historically grounded alternative history can be constructed by analyzing the political, religious, and dynastic tensions of Tudor England and how each stakeholder might have responded. Realistically unlikely, but let's imagine someone sympathetic, a guard, or a noble, helps Anne escape the Tower before her execution. She would need to leave London undetected, escape Henry VIII's extensive spy network, flee to a Catholic country or Protestant-leaning ally. This is not totally implausible. Plots have occurred before. Mary, Queen of Scots, had numerous rescue plots. Henry VIII would view it as treason and a direct embarrassment. He had already moved on, both emotionally and politically, with plans to marry Jane Seymour. He would likely issue a warrant for Anne's recapture, execute or imprison anyone aiding her, declare her guilty in absentia to preserve royal authority. If Anne publicly spoke out, she could become a dangerous political liability, especially if she had fled abroad. Where could Anne have escaped to? Anne spent most of her youth in the French court, serving Queen Claude and Margaret of Austria before returning to England. She spoke fluent French, had refined court manners, and understood French diplomacy. The French court, though Catholic, was increasingly tolerant of reformist ideas and ambivalent toward England. France had tense relations with Henry VIII, especially after the break with Rome. Francis I, King of France, disliked Henry's divorce from Catherine of Aragon and could have used Anne as leverage. Anne was a key advocate for reform and Protestantism, even introducing Henry to William Tyndale's ideas. If she escaped and found asylum in a Protestant region like parts of the Holy Roman Empire or Switzerland, she could become a figurehead for reformers, especially exiled English Protestants, denounce Henry VIII's regime as tyrannical and her trial as a sham, undermine the Church of England's legitimacy if she aligned with Lutheran or Calvinist thinkers. Protestant-leaning princes might use Anne as propaganda against papal and English authority. The Pope could exploit her escape to criticize Henry's marriage policies and excommunication. If she denounced Henry or promoted Protestant reform, her case would become an international controversy. Would Anne have been recognized if she escaped? There are no verified contemporary portraits of Anne Boleyn from her lifetime. Most portraits were painted posthumously, often under her daughter Elizabeth I's reign. However, we have written descriptions. Venetian ambassador, Francesco Sanuto, not one of the handsomest women in the world, but she is of elegant figure. Lancelot de Carl, beautiful with a long neck, wide mouth, and dark eyes. She had distinct features, dark hair, olive complexion, and a long neck. But could ordinary people or foreigners identify her? Unlikely. No mass media, photography, or widespread images existed. Most of the common people in England would not recognize her face unless they had seen her in procession, court, or public ceremonies. European courts? Possibly. She had been a maid of honor in France and the Austrian Netherlands, and was known by reputation, but not face. Her scandalous reputation was widespread, but her physical likeness was not. In Protestant territories, she might have found sympathizers who wouldn't betray her. In Catholic or neutral countries, if word spread that a mysterious woman was claiming to be Anne Boleyn, ambassadors or court members might investigate. But she would not be instantly recognized unless someone revealed her identity. Recognition would depend entirely on whether someone deliberately exposed her. On her own, she likely could have blended in or assumed a false identity in the right place. What about Elizabeth I? Anne's fate could absolutely have altered the succession of her daughter, Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth I, depending on how events unfolded. Elizabeth was 2 years old at the time. Anne's escape could mean Scenario A. Anne escapes, is caught, and executed publicly. Elizabeth would continue to be seen as the bastard daughter of a convicted traitor. Nobility and foreign courts would view her lineage as deeply tainted. When Mary I dies in 1558, Protestant nobles might hesitate to back Elizabeth, fearing association with Anne's treason. However, in reality, Elizabeth did become queen, despite Anne's execution, because Mary I had no heir. Elizabeth was intelligent, politically skilled, and had some noble support. People began to sympathize with Anne posthumously, once Henry's other wives also fell from grace. But if Anne had escaped and continued to publicly claim innocence or stir controversy, Elizabeth might be disqualified or delayed in becoming queen, be viewed as politically dangerous, even be targeted by other claimants to the throne with cleaner lineage, like Mary, Queen of Scots. Scenario B, Anne lives in exile as a Protestant martyr. Elizabeth might benefit spiritually or ideologically, but her mother's continued existence as a fugitive could be seen as a political liability. Her legitimacy could be questioned more strongly by Catholic powers. Anne's survival could harm Elizabeth's chances, but ironically, her execution helped clean the slate for Elizabeth's eventual rise by removing Anne as a divisive figure. What would be Jane Seymour's fate? Jane was Anne Boleyn's lady-in-waiting, and Henry began courting her before Anne was executed. Just 11 days after Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour. Jane gave birth to Edward VI in 1537 and died of postnatal complications. Her fate was entirely tied to Anne's downfall. With Anne alive, Jane's queenship would be more controversial. Some courtiers and foreign monarchs might refuse to acknowledge Jane as the legitimate queen. And if Anne were caught? Forget the sword. She might face burning at the stake, a punishment reserved for heretics and female traitors, a far more gruesome and symbolic death. If caught by a Catholic power, France, Holy Roman Empire, Spain, she might be returned to England if the monarch sought favor with Henry. If caught by Protestant sympathizers, she might be protected, but England could pressure them diplomatically. Getting caught would mean certain death, and strengthen Henry's legitimacy in removing her. Final verdict. Could Anne Boleyn have escaped? Unlikely, but possible. Could Anne go unrecognized? Yes, especially abroad. Few knew her face. Would she be caught? Possibly if betrayed or recognized by courtiers. Would Elizabeth still become queen? Possibly not. Anne's living disgrace or fugitive status could seriously damage Elizabeth's legitimacy. Would it change history? Yes, especially in how Protestantism, royal legitimacy, and Elizabeth's image evolved. Most plausible outcome. Anne becomes a religious political symbol in exile, influencing England from abroad while remaining a controversial and divisive figure.